Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Leslie Ellistad, and I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. We have a wonderful speaker this evening, Dr. Linda Carlson, and I'll fully introduce her later. First of all, I wanted to remind you about who we are, Wellness Through Mindfulness. Many of you already know we started to present topics on mindfulness in 2015, originally at the Shaganappi Hall. And we moved to Zoom with the pandemic. We meet the first and third Thursday of the month. And our aim is to freely provide teachings about mindfulness and related topics. We have two websites. One is thebreathproject.org, and that has some animated videos about meditation and interviews with expert mindfulness teachers. And then the Breath WTM, thebreathproject.org, is about this community. It provides information about upcoming events, videos of previous talks, some written summaries of some of the talks, Dr. Phil Bluestein's Mindful Musings, and other resources. So I would like you to know about our upcoming events. On February 2nd, 2023, Mary Wallace will present on Why Do We Meditate? And on February 16th, Pam Hauk will present on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. We do encourage you to sign up on the WTM website to receive our notices. And you can also, of course, register for our meetings on that website. We do have a question and answer period following Linda's presentation, and that will go from about 8 to 8:25. We'd like to encourage you to pop questions into the chat if they occur to you during the talk, so that we don't lose them. And we also want you to know that it is an option for you to have a live dialogue with Dr. Carlson, or you can just put the question in the chat. We'd like to remind you about the nature of the questions for the Q&A. These sessions are provided strictly with the intention to provide education. It's not a forum to address personal issues. Wellness Through Mindfulness and the participating speakers are not a substitute for professional care. So please ask questions pertinent to the evening's topic or other mindfulness-related questions. Wellness Through Mindfulness events are freely offered. None of the speakers or organizers are paid. We do have costs, though, associated with our technical needs. So that includes maintaining our website and social media and emails. The costs are not high, but they are significant enough that we do need to ask for donations. And so there is a donation button on the homepage of the WTM website, and we have a suggested donation of $5. This just helps us to keep offering what we have here. So the topic for this evening from Dr. Carlson is on life-threatening illness as a catalyst to live your best life. And Dr. Carlson is well placed to present this topic. She is a professor in psychosocial oncology in the Department of Oncology at the Cummings School of Medicine at the University of Calgary, and an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology. She's the director of research and works as a clinical psychologist at the Tom Baker, and she's worked there since 1997. She has had a big role in mentoring other researchers, and she has presented many different, or she's contributed to many different publications, journal articles, etc., and has been awarded with numerous awards. I'm just going to name a couple of them. The names may not mean a lot to our members, but there's the Kawano New Investigator Award in 2006, William E. Rawls Prize in 2007, and there's actually too many to mention them all. There's many, many awards. So obviously she's at the top of her profession, and we are very lucky to have her here tonight. She's also edits journals and speaks internationally at conferences. She's been to the Netherlands, Switzerland, China, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Israel, and all across Canada and the USA to speak. And she's even on a TEDx talk, which you can find on YouTube. It's called Mindfulness for Personal and Collective Evolution and was done in 2016. I also know her through Facebook. At one point, somehow we became Facebook friends, and I know that she has 2 children, 12 and 14, and lives in a beautiful part of Alberta where she's able to be active with her family. So she may want to tell you more about herself, but that's what I would like to share with you. And now I would like to hand it over to Linda. Thank you very much, Linda, for joining us and presenting.
Thanks for the introduction, Leslie. It's very, very appreciative. So I'm just going to start by backtracking a bit. I was originally scheduled to present in June on the same topic, and I can't remember why, but I had to cancel, I think probably at the last minute, and Leslie very graciously stepped up and spoke on the same topic. And so as I was preparing for this talk, I was a bit curious to see, well, what did Leslie say about it? Because I don't want to say the same thing or be, redundant or contradictory. So I was really pleased to watch that talk and see how nicely it meshes with kind of what I'm planning to chat about tonight. So I see it's customary in some of these meetings to say a bit about ourselves before we start. I'm primarily an academic. I'm a clinical psychologist. As Leslie said, I do a lot of research, largely on mindfulness-based interventions for people who are living with cancer and their caregivers and family members. But I'm also a meditator, and that's what brought me to this in the first place. And I had the opportunity when I was in graduate school in Montreal in the early 1990s to have a classmate who spent 7 years just before he got there in the woods, in the forest in Thailand, learning Buddhism and meditating. And so actually had the opportunity to study with him on a regular basis. There was a group of us throughout graduate school where we learned meditation and a bit about Buddhist philosophy and background, and established a pretty regular practice that saw me through, all the stressors of graduate school and life as a young adult, and also a yoga practice. So when I came to the Tom Baker Cancer Center in the University of Calgary, I'm from here actually originally, came back, missed the mountains. Now I live in Canmore, as Leslie said. Had the opportunity to then put this personal practice into play professionally at the Cancer Center. So that's what I'm going to tell you a bit of that story within the context of life-threatening illness and how mindfulness sort of fits in with that. So I'm going to use some slides here. There we go. And I'll get these up and running. And we'll do a little bit of a mix between me talking and showing slides and also some experiential practice along the way. So I was thinking life-threatening illness is a catalyst to live your best life. Okay, how do we best do that? First, obviously, I have to do my land acknowledgement. So I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. Includes the Blackfoot, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda, which is here in Canmore, the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, the Bearspaw, and the Wesley First Nations. I acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples in Canada whose footsteps have marked these lands for many generations, many centuries. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before. And I recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the illness experience. So I have the most experience working with people who have cancer. I've been teaching mindfulness programs to those people for about 25 years now, but there are many similarities across different chronic and life-threatening illnesses. And we'll just explore that a little bit to begin with. And then I'm going to talk about these concepts in psychology speak. I am a clinical psychologist and a psychological scientist. So we talk about things like post-traumatic growth and spirituality. So I'll fill you in on those. And then we'll turn to mindfulness more generally and how it fits in this whole sort of web of things we're talking about. And I'll tell you about our mindfulness-based cancer recovery program, some of the research we've done there. I'll keep that part brief and we'll do some practice as well. So that is the plan. Now, I'm going to have you do a little bit of a thought experiment or a sort of brief imagery exercise here. So if you want to just get yourself comfortable and, let your shoulders drop and even close your eyes and Take a nice breath and exhale. Feel your shoulders dropping, your belly softening. And just take a few moments actually to settle into the breath. You may have been rushing before you got here. Let's just take a moment to arrive. So now I want you to consider putting yourself in the place of someone just learning that they're being diagnosed or have been diagnosed with a serious illness. And you may have had this experience personally already. You can think back to those moments if it's not too upsetting. Or maybe you haven't, you can imagine. So consider that you've been feeling a bit run down, having a few symptoms. Finally managed to get to your doctor and they said, yeah, let's look at this. Let's do a few tests. And you're waiting for test results. Of course, you're feeling a little worried, anxious, not sure how this might go. And then imagine walking into the clinic or the office and sitting down there, and across from you is the healthcare provider who's been helping you, and you can see they've got a concerned look on their face. Just notice how your body feels as you're anticipating perhaps getting some uncertain or bad news. And they say to you, I'm sorry, it's bad news. Your test results have come in and it looks like you have cancer. So just sitting with that for a moment, how does it feel to hear those three words? You have cancer, or you have heart disease, or you have diabetes, you have Parkinson's, you have multiple sclerosis. And then they say, we have to do a few more tests, maybe take a biopsy. We're not sure what your treatment's going to be yet. Maybe you'll need chemo, you might need surgery, and they go on and on. And that's how the encounter finishes. You may leave the room feeling perhaps stunned, confused. So just open your eyes and come back to the scene. I chose the storm image because that's a good encapsulation of how it feels for many people to get this news. So let's talk about the illness experience. Oops, somebody who wants to come in here. There we go. So I like this cartoon because you've got the spider talking to the psychiatrist, and he says, my life's a mess, doc. You got to help me. I just seem to be spinning out of control. And it's funny because that's what spiders do. But it's not so funny when you feel like that in the tornado of this illness experience, right? So what are the hallmark features of being diagnosed with a serious illness? That loss of control that the spider's talking about is a real central feature. And it's difficult for us because as humans, we really like to feel like we have control over what happens in our lives. It's an illusory belief that we have control, but somehow we manage to go through large parts of our life believing it. But when we get this kind of diagnosis, you cannot fool yourself anymore about what you can control and what you can't. So managing that, understanding that there's so many things in life and with this illness that you may not be able to control is challenging. Of course, the minute you hear those words, especially something like you have cancer, you think about your impending death. There's a more immediate threat to your life and your mortality than has always been looming, usually in the background. So, most of us, we go through, of course, we know there's only one way in, only one way out. We're all going to die eventually. Anyone can get run over by a train, but it's quite different when it's right there and you have no choice but to look closely at what does this mean. So that really brings up a lot of existential anxiety, fear about when a person might die, how they might die, what would happen to those left behind, what happens afterwards. So having to face those existential concerns, perhaps for the first time to that extent. And then there's just a loss of certainty, a loss of predictability, complete change in your daily routine. So you've heard the healthcare provider, we have to do a number of tests. We're not sure what the diagnosis, what the treatment might be. We don't know how long it'll be. We don't know if it'll be successful. We can't tell you what the probability is of the disease progressing or coming back. You may have to take time off work, call in your family members, your social support network. Everything is just up in the air. So that's very difficult, again, for us, because we like control, we like routine. It's very challenging. There can be a wide range of emotions that people experience then: grief, sadness, loss, fear about the future, anger, perhaps, if they blame themselves or someone else for what's happened and causing the disease. There also may be guilt and shame if a person blames themselves or some of their behaviors, and feelings of sadness and depression, quite common. And then there's symptoms associated with the disease itself. So there may be pain, acute or chronic pain that may be really long lasting. It's very difficult to continue on when you're in a chronic level of pain. Fatigue is the most common side effect from many cancer treatments, for example, and many people with chronic illness suffer debilitating fatigue. Sleeplessness, insomnia, also very common, and what we call brain fog or chemo brain, or cognitive impairment, where it's hard to just think straight, confused, it's hard to plan, it's hard to organize. And then no matter how good the prognosis may be, there's always a fear of it progressing or coming back, that sort of Damocles hanging over your head. When is the other shoe going to drop? People talk about scanxiety, and that's when you have your checkups, maybe every 6 months, every year. And the build up to that is this huge anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what if it's back? What if the news isn't good? How am I going to cope? So that anxiety around all the follow-up. And of course, caregivers too are under an extreme level of burden and stress themselves, all from worrying about the patient, but also all the changes they have to make in their life to accommodate the illness. So there's a lot going on there. The title was, something like life-threatening illness, as a catalyst to live your best life. Well, how can anything about that be good, right? It's ridiculous to say that, you might say. But many people do say that it is an opportunity to pause, and it's a turning point, perhaps, in a person's life, a chance to slow down. Maybe they do get time off work to reevaluate, almost like a forced midlife crisis. You stop and look, how have I been living my life? Is it what I imagined for myself? Is it consistent with what's important to me, with my values? It's an opportunity to change things up. That's partly why I love working with people who are in this place, have been diagnosed with cancers, because they're very open to trying new things. We may have people who's the rancher from Southern Alberta who would never have done anything as airy-fairy as meditating, but now he's got prostate cancer and he wants to do everything he can to help himself. So he shows up at the group and he's open-minded, and it's really wonderful for us. So there's this concept that we call, in psychological speak, post-traumatic growth or benefit finding, sort of like seeing the silver lining, and also spirituality that come into play around this, using illness as a catalyst to live your best life. And we'll talk more about that in a second. And I also want to talk about what I call the prison of positivity, because it's easy to get sucked into that when we're talking about, see the silver lining. So it's really important to make those distinctions, I think, too. So I want to show you a video that really encapsulates everything I've been talking about so far. It's a little bit long, it's like 8 minutes, but I think it's really well done. So I'm going to, I think I forgot to share. Hold on, I think I forgot to share sound. I'm going to do it again and share sound. Oh, no, I did share sound. I'm going to turn to this video here, and it's over here. I'm going to make it big and play it.
I've lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. It's just, my weight was free falling. In that moment, they give you a clipboard. The first question is, why are you here today? And I just remember that moment. I was just sitting there on that bed, and I was holding that clipboard, and I had the pen in my hand. And I just couldn't write it. I just felt frozen. I felt like the whole world was just falling in. The moment that everything changed. Everything changed sitting there. Nothing else in my life really mattered anymore. They laid me down. They started digging into this lymph. They freeze it locally, but you can still really feel it. They just start going in to basically pull out a piece of your lymph node. I remember laying there. My sister was sitting there with me. And I was laying there. I was in so much pain while they were digging. I just remember squeezing the side of the bed. My sister, she reached out and she grabbed my foot to comfort me. And I remember thinking that she must have done the same for my dad. And the doctor just said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, Jordan." I could hear it in her voice. She was emotional. It was hard for her to tell me, I think, because of my age, because of what it means. We confirmed you have lung cancer and it's stage 4 and it's metastasized to your entire body. That moment, that day, like that's when something had really changed in me. Where it was like, I'm going to live, I'm not going to die. But I had to make that choice to feel that way about it. But I really did feel that way. And I just got this walker. I requested one. I was like, I want a walker that's tall enough for me. And they went and found me a walker, and I started walking at night. Before I'd go to bed, I'd walk until I was really tired. Then, like, I started to step into that feeling, no pun intended, that I can control what I control. I feel like I'm gonna live, and I can earn it though. I can do those things. I can start to try to walk. That'll help me. And I asked in a way for help, for positive thoughts and prayers. I pushed it out there.
The 30-year-old has stage 4 lung cancer, and he's doing his best to make a difference for others. In fact, Jordan was involved in the Cross Cancer Institute's fundraising campaign, We Cross Cancer, before he was ever diagnosed. Thankfully, a walk-in clinic doctor sent him to a specialist. Lung cancer had spread to his lymph nodes, spine, and beyond.
Dr. Randy Sanga came and saw me one day. Came in. He's like, how are you doing? How are you doing? I'm good. I'm good. I'm all right, living the dream, laying here in this bed. He's like, I've got news. We got the results back. He's like, it's the best outcome possible for your situation. You're ALK positive, ALK positive. And it's about 4% of patients have this one. He's like, there's a good targeted pill therapy for this. We're gonna put you on it immediately. We're gonna start today. Alectinib is the drug I take. And I just remember I just grabbed my pillow and just said, just hold on 1 minute, hold on. And just put my pillow on my head and just kind of like, I just cried into my pillow for a minute, like happy tears. I just remember leaving the cross. I walked out the front doors. It was like raining. I just walked out and I could just feel the rain on me. Just standing outside of the cross, just thinking, I'm so lucky to be alive. So grateful to be alive. And I had planned with my ceremony family that we would start the traditional healing. Now that I was discharged from the cross, that's when we would start these other things. Because I'm a very spiritual person. I believe we're spiritual beings here for a human experience. And I knew that I was going to be okay. That all the spiritual work I was doing, the smudging, I was smudging every day, praying every day. My positive mindset, believing I'm going to live. That all of that helped. Everything mattered. Nothing was not important. It's the most love I've ever felt in my life. I want to spend my time doing these things, continuing to get to know myself so that I can show up as a whole person for whatever amount of time is left in my life. Death, it's hard to describe. It's like I can feel it in the room. I'd earned my life back for the time being, but it's actually not there's no finite ending to that. You have to earn it every day. But this forced me to slow down. This created the condition for me to step into gratitude, because it's like right now, when I go to the gym in the morning, I think I get to. Instead of saying I have to do something, I get to. I get to go to the gym. I get to go to the gym because I'm not laying in the cross cancer right now, like so many people are right now. But it feels like we're here to learn something, and we're here to just love. And maybe that's what we're here to learn, is just to learn about love. Accepting unconditional love and giving it. I feel like I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be in this decade because of this experience, which I think was supposed to happen. I'm just here in my room, across cancer. That's life. It's a journey. I really am gonna be okay. I am absolutely certain of that. I'm gonna get out of here and find love and have a good life and live. No doubt about it. I'm gonna walk out of here and I'm gonna get healed and I'm gonna be cancer free. I know that for certain. And then I'm gonna have a life of love like I've never had before, and passion, and being grateful for every day, and closer with my family. Making a family my own, having one, just having that love and this spirit. I know that I'm gonna live.
All right. I'm gonna go back to the slides in a second. I just came across that video like yesterday or the day before. I'd never seen it before. I was thinking about this talk and I was like, oh my goodness, he just did my whole talk, like from start to finish. Amazing actually to hear what he said. And so I'll reiterate, I guess, what he was saying in theoretical psychological terms, but he talked about the cancer experience and the shock of it and how awful it was. But then he turned almost immediately to this post-traumatic growth. And so when we talk about this, there's 5 areas within post-traumatic growth. So appreciation for life. So gratitude, we saw that. Altruism, helping others, raising money, a sense of priorities, appreciating what's good. I get to go to the gym. Personal strength, so being resilient, confident, having a sense of humility, being authentic to our own values, seeing new possibilities, new perspectives, adaptability, openness to new ways of living, new ways of working. You can see he got involved in spiritual growth. I don't know if he already was, but getting involved with the Indigenous community and the ceremony there. Often people, as I said, are open to mindfulness things there. Improve relationships. So more loving. He spoke about being loving, empathic, supportive, how important it is to have social support. So really improved relationships and the spiritual growth. So meaningful beliefs, deeper level of awareness, clear purpose. So when we look at the definition of positive or post-traumatic growth, it's positive psychological change experienced as a result, often a direct result of highly challenging or traumatic life circumstances. So post-traumatic stress is one side of it, and that's very common in people who've gone through cancer or other serious illnesses and treatment. But the flip side is this post-traumatic growth, this potential. And it really intertwines a lot with spirituality, which is defined as this belief in something beyond the self. So it is striving to answer questions about the meaning of life, connection with other people, truths about the universe, mystical experience. And this diagram here just sort of differentiates what we call spirituality, which is non-denominational, from religion, which is more about adhering to specific practices and rituals that go with a certain religion. Spirituality is more about personal meaning, feeling connected, values. So it really overlaps quite a bit with that idea of post-traumatic growth. And the interesting thing is that when you look at the correlations between, you can measure these things, spirituality and post-traumatic growth. We have questionnaires for everything. They're associated. More spirituality and more post-traumatic growth is associated with other better outcomes. So less anxiety, less depression, all those kinds of things. So that's the flip side of it, right? Is, okay, we just have to think positive, just think positive and everything will be fine. It's not that. Post-traumatic growth and authentic spirituality are not just putting on a happy face and saying, I feel great, everything's going to be great. It's authentic. When it's not authentic, or when you feel like you can't express anything other than this positive mindset, it becomes a prison. And people then are suppressing or denying their authentic emotional experience. Like you heard in that clip from Jordan, and in the exercise we did, I imagine all sorts of emotions came up, and many of them were difficult emotions. And that's perfectly normal, and that's perfectly natural, and that's perfectly healthy, right? Having a full range of emotions and allowing yourself to express them and allowing yourself to share them and experience them. That's the only way they transform themselves. So if we try and stuff them down and pretend they don't exist and everything is great, well, they're going to pop up all over the place, and, they're oozing out of the cracks all the time. But in our culture, we see it a lot, this sort of the power of positive thinking, think positive. And I think everyone's well-meaning about that, but it can become the happy jail, right? Or the prison of positivity. So we have to be really careful ourselves if we're experiencing difficult emotions around coping with illness, and other people around us too. Instead of saying, oh, just think positive, it's like, well, how are you today? How are you feeling? Are you okay? What can I do to help? And embracing the full spectrum of emotion, because it's not unhealthy, it's actually healthy. And again, you will often see that transformation to a place of gratitude and healing and post-traumatic growth. So this is a little academic-y. It's talking about how, the question for me as a psychologist was, okay, post-traumatic growth is good. We want to try and facilitate it, but how? How do we do it? And this sort of talks about how an experience can either be stressful and traumatic, or it can actually be more positive or a growth sort of response, right? So having the illness be an internal source from the body can lead to hypervigilance. You're always poking and prodding and worrying about every ache and pain, or it can result in healthcare, self-care, and adoption of healthy lifestyles, and maintenance and responsibility and involvement. So how can you get to the growth mindset versus the stress mindset? So some things that have been shown to be important are active coping versus avoiding it. We don't avoid negative emotions. We don't avoid getting all the information we need necessarily. So active acceptance of the situation, making meaning, telling a story, creating a narrative, emotional awareness and expression, as I mentioned, and also that idea of closeness and support and openness with other people. And now this brought me back to Leslie's talk from last time. And if you haven't seen it on this similar subject, I encourage you to go back and watch it. I really enjoyed it, Leslie. This was it here. And so she had summarized 5 sort of pieces of advice or key features of going through a life-threatening illness. And they were very similar to what I already have in my talk. And the things that I always think about is acceptance, letting go of losses, grieving losses, looking at the new normal, surrendering to receiving. So that idea about, no, I'm okay, I don't need anything, right? But saying, yeah, I could use some support and some practical help and some emotional support. Managing symptoms, as I mentioned as well, and finding a sense of balance and ease and calm and peacefulness. And she talked about the universalness of aging, illness, and death, and how we all experience that in different ways, and how we can use the teachings from various spiritual traditions, as well as the mindfulness practices, to help us navigate that whole pathway. So let's see. I want to have time to do a practice, but I also want to tell you a little bit about our programs. I might go quickly through this section here. This is around what is mindfulness. I'm sure most people here are already familiar with it, but I do find there's lots of misconceptions. For example, Time Magazine, if you listen to what they say, you think that if you meditate or you're mindful, you'll become a blissful, calm, young, blonde woman, right? There's this mythology around it. But really the definition is just paying attention on purpose in the present moment with an attitude that's open and accepting. And it's two things. It's a way of being in the world. So we can be more or less mindful no matter what we're doing, even during cancer treatment or washing the dishes. But it's also practice where we cultivate the capacity to be mindful in everyday life through meditation. So I like this cartoon. It just illustrates the way of being in the world. You know, who's more mindful, the human or the dog? Dog wins, right? The dog's paying attention and interacting with what's right there in front of them, while the human's mind is cluttered with things that aren't even there. And the practice of meditation. So it turns out that when we are not in the present moment, our mind's all over the place. We have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day. It turns out when you actually study this, that about half the time thoughts are not in the present moment. Some people think it should be higher, but that's what the research shows. And also that people are happier when they're in the present moment, when they're paying attention to what's happening, no matter what it is. Why? Because if we're not in the present moment, we're often in the past. We're reliving things, saying, oh, why me? Or I coulda, shoulda, woulda done it different. And we're having regrets and we're feeling depressed. Or we're racing off into the future and we're thinking of all the things that might go wrong and how we're never going to have time to get it all done and all the disasters that might befall us, right? We're not here in the present moment, in the now, when everything actually happens, where we actually live our lives. So academically, we break mindfulness into these three components: intention, attention, and attitude. So it's really just the why of mindfulness. Why do we practice it? What is it that we're practicing? We're practicing paying attention, so it's sort of the core of it. And how do we do it? So that's the attitudes, the open, accepting attitudes. And this is a list of some of the many attitudes that are conducive to mindfulness practice. And we've sort of seen these terms before: acceptance, patience, letting go, non-striving, non-judging. You know, and I would add to these things like openness, curiosity, self-compassion. You know, and often people say these attitudes like non-striving, patience. I mean, this is totally the opposite of how many people and how I live my life, perhaps. And so I often think it's useful to, well, look at the opposite. So if you don't move towards these attitudes, you know, what are you doing? You're being judgmental, impatient, rejecting, grasping, a striving know-it-all. It's a recipe for stress and unhappiness, right? And so then some of those myths: mindfulness, it's not relaxation or hypnosis. It's not a prayer. It's not a religious practice. You may feel relaxed, right? You may feel calm. You can incorporate your mindfulness into whatever your religious tradition is. It's not clearing your mind of all thoughts like those blissful looking young women on Time Magazine covers necessarily. It's accepting and being aware of all your thoughts and the process of how they arise, how they fall away, how they cause suffering, how our interpretations and the stories we tell ourselves about the thoughts that arise cause our suffering. So it's not always calm and peaceful, nor is it intended to be. So this is a nice poem from Thoreau. You might be familiar with it, that illustrates some of these ideas. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Thoreau. So when a life-threatening illness enters your world, that when I come to die, it could be sooner than you might have thought. And so the motivation to really live your best life is more profound. And that's the flip side of death. You know, death is frightening, but it's also the motivator. Because if our lives never ended, well, you know, there's always tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow to do everything you want to do. But when you realize your days are numbered, which they always are and always have been, that's a motivation to really wake up and, you know, see if I could not learn what it had to teach, right? Go to the woods, embrace your loved ones, really live fully, because our time, all of us, our time is limited. Here's where we take a breath, So let's do that. Just close your eyes or look at the scene. Inhale and exhale. We're going to do a slightly longer practice in a few moments, but let's just take this as a bit of a reprieve. Tune into your body. Notice if you're slumped over, check your posture. As you exhale, let your shoulders move down away from your ears. Allow your belly to soften. Your feet to rest on the floor. Feel the contact, the grounding. Allow your face to soften. Allow your breath to just settle down into the belly. Feel the rising and falling with the breath. Okay, I'm going to move on now and talk to you about mindfulness-based stress reduction. Again, many of you may be familiar with this program. It was started by a guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn, who wrote this wonderful book, Full Catastrophe Living, way back in the 1970s. Been around quite a long time now. So he created a standardized 8-week group program that combines training in mindfulness meditation with stress reduction and conversation and dialogue. And this program has been studied in many different contexts for pretty much every kind of psychological or physical disorder you could imagine and shown beneficial. There's a website that covers all the research in mindfulness called GoAmra. And this actually just shows you the scientific literature on mindfulness and how it's grown exponentially over the years. So what you're seeing here is that in 1980, right up until about the year 2000, there was just a few papers here and there. But then around the mid 2000s, let's see. So these are just academic journal article titles with the word mindfulness in them. Around 2000 is when we published our first paper of mindfulness-based stress reduction for people with cancer. And it's just gone crazy since then. There's over 1,000 a year. And these are just scientific articles. So our program is called Mindfulness-Based Cancer Recovery. It's an adaptation of MBSR. And we started in 1996, actually. Some of my colleagues began talking about developing a program like this based on their personal practices. I came in 1997. I knew about MBSR and I'd met Jon Kabat-Zinn. And I said, yeah, let's do this. I really want to develop a program and study it. And so we started doing research and we started our program then. It's open to anyone diagnosed with cancer and family members at the Tom Baker and actually now across Alberta because it's still on Zoom. And I actually just started a program yesterday. If anybody on here is interested, you could probably still get in starting next week. So you can email me after if you are. We do it in groups of, in person, it's been more like 15 to 20 people. On Zoom, it's more like 10 to 15. We keep it a bit smaller, but anywhere from 3 to 10 times a year. We've been doing that over the years, well over 3,000 individuals through there now. And so we have this ongoing program, and we also have research studies. So the program's 9 weeks. It's 2-hour now meetings, 2-hour weekly meetings on Zoom, and there's discussion, there's teaching material. We do mindful movement, gentle yoga, and lots of different meditation practices. People do homework every day to develop a mindfulness practice. And Michael Speck and I wrote a book on the program. Actually, I have it here, but that's what it looks like. Oh, it doesn't work with the thing on. It's a home study manual. So if you're interested, you can get it in all bunch of different languages now. And it covers the whole curriculum with detailed exercises and scripts and things. So we do a wide variety. It's kind of a smorgasbord of practices that we teach people, from a body scan where people are lying down there, bringing their attention through their body, to sitting meditation, walking, open awareness, where we just pay attention to everything that's going on. We do some imagery with mountains and lakes, and also loving kindness and compassion. And we practice gentle yoga, gentle mindful movement, to help people sort of reconnect with the body, which is so important for how we connect with emotions and also recovering from illness. So I won't do too much about research here for people who think research is a dirty word. but I will summarize it. We've done many, many studies over the years where we looked at improvements in symptoms like the ones I've mentioned, anger, anxiety, depression, mood, sleep, fatigue, whole range of different things. We've also looked at partners who also find it beneficial. And I'm going to tell you about some of the research where we looked at spirituality and post-traumatic growth, because we've been talking about that. But we also take blood samples and saliva, and we look at how the practices affect those things too. And we see changes in things like blood pressure, in immune system function, in stress hormones, in cell aging, a whole range of different things. So the first study we did that looked at post-traumatic growth and spirituality was just an interview study. Just 9 people who did our program and then went to a graduates group on a weekly basis for anywhere from 1 to 6 years. And we did interviews and a focus group, and we developed themes. So the themes that came out, and these just arose from the interviews, we weren't really trolling for this, but the personal transformation concept. So this fits into the post-traumatic growth. And I don't think I'll read the quotes, but what people are saying is it's lessening cancer as part of their identity. They're feeling a change in perspective. I like this quote: cancer can make a person very bitter, or it can make them very wise. I'm not crazy about having had cancer, but it has certainly done a lot in my life. Developing feelings of gratitude, we heard that in the video too, and changing that relationship to oneself. So knowing oneself better, going inside. And they talked about spirituality as well. I meditate, I've become a lot more spiritual. It's maybe a cliche, but it's about spirituality, connection with something outside of yourself, exercise of the spirit. It's wise, it's universal. We did another study along these lines with 14 people, gave them questionnaires and as well as interviews, and they talked about developing self-awareness, self-efficacy, feeling confident that they could take control of some areas in their life, accepting things they couldn't control, letting go of outcome. And these are some quotes from one woman around spirituality. I think I'm better. I stand at better peace with myself, and it's because of the meditation. By all means, I know that. I was at such peace. It was so spiritual. She says, I always knew there was something I had to learn from this, but I never knew what it was. I just never knew. I think now what I learned is to appreciate things, to take time for things, which I think before I was always so busy, controlling, bossy. And so she learned to slow down. I'm at peace. I understand the cancer a lot better. And if it recurs, I think I'm prepared for that. And I'm always happy when people leave the program saying, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going to be okay. I have the tools now. I have the confidence that I can handle whatever life throws at me. This was one other study with 211 people in our program. They were either taking the program or they were waiting for it. And we did surveys sort of at the beginning, halfway through, and then at the end, and looked at post-traumatic growth and spirituality. And really what we found is that they both improved, but the spirituality improved a bit more than the post-traumatic growth, and it developed earlier, the sense of connection and meaning. And the post-traumatic growth, that sort of benefit finding, took longer and kept developing over. We followed people in some studies up to a year. All right, so now I want to do a little bit of a longer practice to round things out here. And something that is very simple, but I think helps us tap into this concept of something larger than ourselves and a way of finding connection. So I call it blue sky mind, or sometimes it's called sky-like mind. So hence the sky photo. So you can look at that, or you can close your eyes. And so just again, take a seat so that you're sitting upright enough that you can breathe easily. Take a nice breath in, and as you exhale, just allow your body, your belly, your legs, your face to soften. Settle into the breath, and you'll notice perhaps already that there's all sorts of thoughts coming and going. And you can imagine the thoughts are like clouds in the sky. And you may even picture yourself just sitting in a grassy meadow next to a stream, perhaps even, and gazing up at the sky. so thick and dark. They're low to the horizon. That's all you can see is those dark thoughts, the dark clouds, the worries, the regrets, all those fears. Clouds are in constant motion. And so are thoughts. Thoughts are almost automatic. We really don't even control them sometimes any more than we can control the clouds. So we can sit and just watch the thoughts, the clouds come and go. Without really latching onto them, without believing the thoughts. So we can identify them, maybe, oh, there are worries floating by, or here comes the fear. Oops, there's a memory. But if we don't pursue the thought, it'll just float by. And perhaps over time, the clouds begin to thin. And then you can see that blue sky. And that blue sky is always, always there beyond the clouds. And that blue sky is actually our true nature. It's a vast field of awareness. It's boundless, vast, endless, and timeless. But there's a freedom and space in the blue sky. When we connect with the blue sky, the passing clouds down below really don't matter. What's true and authentic and timeless is the sky-like mind. A field of awareness out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing. I will meet you there, says Rumi in a poem. And so everyone, we all share that field of awareness. We all originate. It's a shared consciousness. So as you sit here, you can note breathing as an anchor. Keeps you still as you watch those clouds, those thoughts, those worries, those plans. Those traumatic memories, they just float by. And in between them, we get those glimpses of the deep, vast, endless sky. So there's space to breathe. There's a connection to others, to something larger than yourself. Maybe a sense of calm, of peace. Of surrender and acceptance. So we can continue to rest here in this field of awareness. This place of ease. This connection with the vast awareness that is a part of ourselves beyond the labels, the roles we play, the jobs or the possessions, beyond all those things. The most basic human nature of connection, of awareness. Of timelessness. There's no beginning, there's no end. Just a few breaths more in this place of sky-like mind. Just ring my bell here. So if your eyes were closed, just opening them up. And just take a moment if you want to pop into the chat your experience of that particular practice. And don't worry if it was hard to focus and your mind was jumping around and all those things. That's quite usual. So if you want to put a few words in the chat, that's great. If not, it's fine. Let's move on to the last couple of slides. Someone's asking for my email and it'll be in this next slide. So here. So often I'll give these talks and people ask, well, how can I start? I'm convinced, sign me up. Oh, so there's some mini breathing exercises. I didn't actually do them in this talk, but there are resources I can send you on those. And here, there's just a number of websites with free mindfulness. instruction that I really like. So UCSD Center for Mindfulness, Mindful Self-Compassion, there's Palu's Mindfulness, and the Free Mindfulness Project. And also, of course, all the great videos and resources on the Wellness Through Mindfulness website. And then finally, just contact info. So there's my website. If you're interested in the science, you can download all the articles. There's my email right there, l.carlson@ucalgary.ca. You can follow me on Twitter. There's a Facebook page called Mindfulness-Based Cancer Recovery, and a whole website on mindful cancer recovery, specifically for all the different books and resources and talks. There's an online program and an app as well that people can look at. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see. Maybe look at the chat here. Someone says, let's see. I prefer guided meditations, easier to stay focused. It is for most people, yeah, to have a guided meditation. That's why we actually start with lots of recorded tracks. You know, meditating on your own without guidance can be quite difficult at first. And someone says, I've never meditated in the evening. It's much harder than the morning. Yeah, mind was wandering all over the place. Not uncommon. Relaxing and refreshing, laying down helped. Imagine looking straight up at the sky. Oh yeah, there's nothing like lying in the grass looking up at the sky unless you're allergic to grass. Just took my blood pressure as low as it's been in months. Thank you. That's great. Email address l.carlson@ucalgary.ca. I can put it in the chat too. Yeah, so I guess we can open it up for questions. Oh, someone took the program. Oh gosh, we were at the Richmond Road Diagnostic Center. That was after the flood, when they were renovating the Holy Cross, so 2013. That was a terrible room too. Hey, it was dirty and we had to lie on the floor. Well, good for you. Thank you for coming, Carol. Leslie, do you want to jump in?
Thank you very much, Linda. That was a wonderful talk. I was really impressed by the extensive research on meditation and particularly on the cancer recovery. In general, do people keep meditating after they've taken that program?
Well, that is a hard thing to figure out, actually.
Yeah.
So the longest follow-up we've done with people in a study was about 300 breast cancer patients who were post-treatment, and we followed them for a year. But even to get people to fill out practice diaries, or keep track of their practice for a year was difficult. The people who did fill it out, it looked like many of them were still practicing, but a lot of people I know do drop off. But the interesting thing is that the benefits, so when we actually, give them the questionnaires with the mood and the stress and all that, the benefits seem to be maintained, whether they're formally practicing a lot or not in some cases, and so that's an ongoing debate too, is do you have to keep practicing to have continued benefit? And the research is inconclusive on that. Some studies do show what we call dose response. So the higher the dose, the more you meditate, the more you respond in terms of improving symptoms, but not all studies show that. And I think there's potentially that could be due to all the learning that people get from the program. It's not, the practice is important to retrain your mind and the capacity to be mindful, but also the understanding of how the stories we tell ourselves and how we interpret the world also impact our suffering, right? And so that intellectual understanding, I think, is also super important and is something that people carry on with them. Yeah.
And do you know whether people continue to do like the 3-minute mindfulness break once they've taken that class? I'm wondering if that might be one of the more prominent benefits.
Well, sure. And so what we do in our program, we call them minis. This is similar to the three-minute mindfulness. They're called mini meditations. And we teach about, 5 or 6 different minis that people can use anytime, anywhere. And people often do say at the end of the class, we'll ask sort of what was most helpful for you, or what are you still doing? And they often say, oh, I do the minis all the time.
Yeah.
Because you can do them when you're in a waiting room or in the dentist chair in line for the, at the grocery store, sitting at a red light, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had some people take it more than once? Like if they come
Yeah.
back with a cancer recurrence, do some of them take it?
Some people just take it for a refresher.
Yeah.
Some people will take it early on in their treatment, and it's difficult sometimes to come to all the classes and do all the practice when you're feeling really rotten in the middle of a chemo course or something like that. So they might come, once they're done treatment, they'll come back a year later or 6 months later, and we welcome repeat offenders. It's like call them sometimes.
Yeah. We do have a question here. Is there a particular time of day or amount of time that you recommend for people to meditate each day for best results?
Yeah, well, I think having a regular practice is important, especially when you're learning. And we often, so the practice we do in our program is 30 minutes a day of meditation plus 15 minutes of yoga. So it's a fairly big dose. What tends to be most commonly recommended is about 20 minutes a day. But again, if you can do 10 minutes a day, that's great too. And in terms of timing, many people find that first thing in the morning is best for them. If it fits with your schedule, it sort of sets you up for your day, kind of gets you, gets your nervous system settled down, gets your mindset good. If you're able to do that. And everybody's a little bit different in terms of your schedule and your circadian rhythms, like when you feel energetic, when you feel tired. Right after lunch, most people, it's a bit of a downtime where you feel sleepy, have a little siesta is not the best time, maybe because you might fall asleep. Right before bed, some people use mindfulness practices to help them fall asleep. And that's one thing, and it can be beneficial. But if you're trying to sort of learn the practices, doing them when you're sleepy is not the best time. And the other thing I would really say is schedule it. Put it in your calendar, put it in your, your reminders, make it like an appointment with yourself. Because what tends to happen is, we've got busy lives, we've got a million things to do. Everyone's always taking care of everybody else, right? You've got, I've got the family and, the kids and the husband and the dog and the cat and the job and, the laundry and the groceries and et cetera, right? So the thing for yourself is the bottom of the list. And, A, you hardly ever get there. And B, if you do, you're too tired, right? So putting that at the top of your list, scheduling it in really is very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Somebody mentioned that they like the loving kindness meditation on the CD.
That's Carol who took the program. Yeah. So I can actually, we still have the CDs, but we also have all our tracks from our program online. I can share a link to that. Let me find it. I don't think it's on the slides. So Maureen Engen is one of the people who started the program, and we have a range of different audio tracks from different people that have recorded them. So loving kindness, I'll tell you about that in a second. I'm just going to try and find. There it is here. Let me find the link and stick it in the chat for these exercises. So it's on a thing called the batch study, which is a study we did where we shared things, but it's open to everybody to use these. I'm going to put in here. And then I will actually show you where you can find them. Okay. Okay. There, do you see the match study thing there?
Yes.
Yeah, so there are, I just brought it up because, whoops, all those sorts of things going on here. Okay. There are yoga postures. So there's videos. That's Shirley McMillan, one of our longtime instructors. So there's a couple of different lying postures that she takes you through. There's a couple of standing posture videos. They're about 10-15 minutes. And then the audio files is this last button here. And this is all the guided audio meditation. So there's a body scan, a sitting meditation. The body scan's Michael Specca. I do the sitting. I didn't remember that the metta is also another word for loving kindness is Maureen, but there's walking, stand, and there's also audios for the yoga. And there's a lake meditation there too. So anybody is welcome to use those. The loving kindness meditation, it's traditionally called metta practice, is really, really beneficial, I find, for many people who are kind of harsh on themselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing this right. I'm not handling my life well. I should be able to cope better. Loving kindness is really about starting with ourselves and extending the kind of compassion and caring and loving kindness you might to someone else going through a similar circumstance. It's easy to reach out to your friends and have compassion for them, but we often don't turn that inwards towards ourselves and our own suffering and the difficult experiences people are going to. So loving kindness practice, there's many places you can get guided meditations around that. And there's whole mindful self-compassion courses you can take. It's quite popular.
Thank you. Can you say anything about symptom management?
Sure. Oops, what did I just do? I'm like clicking buttons all over the place here. I just lost. Oh, there it is. I just lost the chat. Symptom management. Yeah. So any symptom in particular, like pain?
Well, the typical cancer symptoms. I don't know if you have experience with
yes,
people asking questions about that.
Yeah. Well, let's do pain a little bit. Let's talk about pain. So if we think about pain, often it's useful to think about a kind of an equation of overall suffering. So big S, suffering, the suffering due to pain equals pain itself. So the physical sensations of pain multiplied by resistance. So P times R. So resistance, by resistance, we mean physical resistance and psychological resistance to pain. Basically we hate being in pain. It's miserable and we want it to stop. And the idea of having to live with this pain is almost unbearable. And so the pain itself is magnified by this. That's the psychological resistance, the hating the pain, the wanting it to go away, the being miserable about it. And then physical resistance is tensing up and holding around a painful area. So when we practice meditation, if we're doing a breathing exercise, or a body scan, we can focus in on the painful area specifically and explore the moment-to-moment experience of the pain. And as we breathe into the painful area, we can relax tension around it. So it's a knee or a hip or whatever it is. We can exhale and try and soften around and release, and even use imagery of melting and things like that to soften the physical resistance to the pain, which can sometimes decrease the overall experience of pain. And then we can also work with our thoughts around the pain and our interpretations and the stories we tell ourselves about how unbearable it is. So that often people report that they still have the physiological sensation of the pain, like the tissue damage is still there, but their suffering related to pain is much less.
Thank you.
So that's one example. And if anyone wants me to talk specifically about other symptoms, I'm happy to.
There's also a question, is the current round of MBSR through Wellspring?
Wellspring also does it. So we have trained facilitators at Wellspring. So there's one program going on at the Tom Baker that I'm leading, and there's also one at Wellspring that I believe starts tomorrow, maybe. So you can look on the Wellspring website and sign up for that program too. So we try to coordinate so that we used to anyway, so that ours would be during the day and Wellspring would do it in the evening or the weekend. I'm not sure that that's happening this go around, but that gives you a couple of options, and they're still doing Zoom or remote, Zoom based ones too, I think.
Okay. What about the management of the fear of dying or of death?
Yeah. I have to say it's not in the curriculum that we do routinely, because we do have a mixed group of patients. And, I'd have to say this program that we do is kind of an introductory sort of thing, just, learning the basics of mindfulness and meditation and body scanning and sitting. But when it comes up, we do talk about some of the traditional approaches to working with death, which is exposure. So is actually thinking it through, what are you worried about, and doing an actual meditation on imagining the process of death and dying, and sort of desensitizing ourselves to that, because in Western culture we have so little exposure to death and people dying and dead bodies that we're very afraid of it because it's very unknown to us. So often just talking about, well, the practicalities of it, have you thought about where you want to die, and doing it in a kind of a meditative way with visualizations and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and Leslie, I'm sure you have thoughts about that too, right?
Yeah, I'm like most people. I think about it and then I stop thinking about it.
Well, preparing for death, it's almost like that saying, right? Is, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, right? And it brings a lot of comfort to people to feel prepared for death, right? Ask that question, if my death was impending, would I be okay with that right now? Am I prepared for it, right?
I have had a couple of like health scares that turned out not to be serious, and I do recall that the thinking about death that I did without a health scare was way different than the thinking I did when I had a health scare.
In what way, can you say?
Like, it was much more real. It was like, yes, this life is actually going to come to an end. Like, there's a sense of continuity that fools us. That it's somebody else that happens to. And there's also that discomfort still. I have some, not as a physician, when I've actually retired, Linda, you may not know that, but I've retired. But I didn't feel uncomfortable with people who had life-threatening illness as a physician, because I had a role. But I noticed that as a person who maybe just meets somebody not close, who's gone to the other side, like they know they have a fatal illness, I do feel some, like, we're in different camps somehow, which I would like to learn how to not be that way. Like, I don't know if you've had any.
I think you just have to respect that, right? I know that your experience is not the same as mine.
Yeah.
Right? And that's okay, though. It doesn't mean that you can't do your very best with humility to understand what they're going through, and recognizing that you'll never understand what they're going through at the same time, right? But and that's why, I mean, one of the hallmarks of end of life or really serious life-threatening illness is this sense of isolation, right? Is that no matter how many people are around you, you die alone. And that is something to grapple with, and that's something people really do struggle with. And I do find that the group format and being with other people who just get it, right? I haven't had the cancer diagnosis, and as I spent 25 years talking to people who do, I still am not in that camp of people who get it, because it really is a different experience to be the one going through that. And so people do find a lot of comfort and solace being in a group of others who are having a similar experience. And that's really profound, I think, in helping with that existential isolation and loneliness.
Can you mention some of the resources available for people who are dealing with cancer in Calgary?
Oh, sure.
Or
well,
area?
I mean, so Wellspring is one that's in the community. It's a community-based organization, a nonprofit that's free membership, and they have really good peer support. It's more based around peer support and different programs they have for complementary therapies. They have drop-ins for yoga and meditation and creative therapies and all kinds of things. And then professionally, at the Tom Baker Cancer Center and at the Cross is the psychosocial resources and supportive care. So there we have psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, counselors of all stripes to really guide people through that whole minefield. And the nice thing is that our counselors all specialize in certain types of cancers. So we have one person who really just does brain tumors and head and neck, and has been doing that for 30 years. And so really understands the specifics around that type of cancer. We have people who do just breast cancer and people who do just gastrointestinal, like colorectal. And so that's a great place to start. Is anyone can get a referral through psychosocial resources to see one of these counselors. And then we have a number of different professionally led group programs like the MBCR.
Thank you. Now, someone has asked, what were the two free apps you mentioned? Insight Timer and...
let me see what I had on there. Insight Timer is a real nice one. It's free and it's simple. I also had, the one I had on here called AM Digital Therapeutics. That's one that has an app that Michael Specka and I made. So it's like a program within the larger app. I'll actually show you. Let me find it. here. So we tried to approximate the in-person program. So we went into a recording studio and we recorded some of our teaching lessons, and then they turned it into an app with all these tracks. Here, I'll just share this shortly here. Okay. So it's called AMDTX. So they call it a digital therapeutic. It's a mindfulness app essentially, and within it, you can get it on the App Store, Google Play. There is something called the Mindfulness-Based Cancer Survivorship Journey. And this journey is where it takes you through sequentially. So you kind of learn it in order the way you would in an in-person program. So I can grab that website and share it. I'll also share the slides as well afterwards. Other mindfulness apps, gosh, the really popular ones are things like Headspace, Calm, 10% Happier. There's a huge host of them out there now as well. I like the simple one, like the Insight Timer. It has some guided meditations, and you can just, I like to just time myself without the guidance. But there's so many out there now too. Someone also sent me a message about elaborating on the minis. So the mini exercises are all breathing exercises. I can teach you. We've got a couple. Do we have a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. How about we do? Oh, we'll do the wave breath. This is one of my favorite ones. So let's just sit upright yet again, and you can close your eyes if you want, or just keep them open and turn your attention to your breath. And now just noting to yourself in as you breathe in and out as you breathe out. And we're just going to try and come to what we would call a deep breath or a belly breath, or just a sort of prolonged breath. But try and let it deepen naturally without sort of forcing the pace. And then we're going to add a count to the in and out. So, and a visualization. So you can imagine a wave. So as you breathe in, imagine it counting up, 1, 2, 3, 4, you crest the wave. And then as you breathe out, you count down, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then smoothly in again, 1, 2, 3, 4, crest the wave, and then out, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can visualize that like a nice smooth wave going up and down. And some people like to make little like figure eights or infinity signs, but the idea is it up 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, and find a comfortable rhythm so your breath is quite long and extended, but not forced. You can open your eyes. So that is one of the minis. And so obviously you don't have to close your eyes, you can do it. And what that does is balances the in-breath and the out-breath. And physiologically, the in-breath is associated with nervous system arousal or excitability. So it's more fight or flight. It wakes you up more. The in-breath, it accelerates your heart rate, and the out-breath is associated with the relaxation response or the parasympathetic nervous system. So as you breathe in, literally every breath, your heart rate escalates, and as you breathe out, your heart rate decreases, your body slows down a little bit. And when you even out the in and the out, it brings you to a nice balanced place. So if you're up here vibrating really, really anxious, it'll bring you down. If you're kind of sleepy and lethargic, it might bring you up a little bit.
Thank you.
Sure.
Linda, I feel like I'm going to steal a moment here with you.
Mine's just screen sharing. Hold on. Oh, I am. Sorry about that. I meant to stop that before I did the wave.
I imagine that when you go to these conferences, you hear about research in the broad area of mindfulness-based research. And I'm curious if there's surprises showing up.
What are surprises, or what are the latest controversies? Well, there's been a bit of a move over the last few years looking at the downside of mindfulness. That it's not for everybody. And some people have detrimental side effects. It's usually actually not these 8-week introductory programs, but people who go to more intensive retreats sometimes have difficulties. So there's some discussion around that. There's a lot of interest in the question you asked, how much do you have to practice to have a benefit? There's a lot of work looking at brain scanning, what's happening in the brain when we practice mindfulness, what's happening in the body in terms of things I mentioned, like immune function and, getting down to the level of like gene expression and those kind of things. Expanding it into more and more populations, like you basically name a psychological disorder or disease of any kind, and there's probably a study that's looked to see if some form of mindfulness-based intervention might help. I think trauma also, people looking more at trauma sensitive mindfulness is been of interest, and that ties in with the looking at health equity in underserved groups. Because so much of the research has been done on middle class, educated white women, in the mindfulness area, and that's who tends to show up in the studies as well. So trying to expand that, into different income brackets, different educational backgrounds, different ethnic groups. There's been a big emphasis there as well.
And are you finding there's any extra challenges with making mindfulness programs like yours acceptable to different cultural groups, especially
there's
if
a
they
lot
have
of interest around that. And I think the way people approach that is to sort of interview people or have them, show them a normal mindfulness program, a standard one, and say, does this resonate with you? Does it make sense? How would you like to see it done? And so there's been quite a lot of really good work like that done in Latinx communities in the States, in African-American people. And usually it starts by saying, okay, here's what we normally do. Like, does this work for you? And what would be better?
And the last question I want to ask is, what are some of the joys of the work for you, of the work that you do? I know you mentor a lot of like PhD candidates and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, the work I do broadly, for sure, is training students. I do lots of leadership around professional societies and so much stuff that I'm doing. There's a new society called the International Society for Contemplative Research that I've been part of creating, and it just launched last year, and we have our first conference coming up in just 2 weeks. It's called ISCR, International Society for Contemplative Research, and it's interdisciplinary. So we have people from religious studies, anthropology, humanities, philosophy, as well as neuroscience, clinical science, all coming, to gather together to talk about contemplative practices, and just across the board. It's going to be really, really fun.
Yeah, great. We have a comment from Deb Putnam. She said that she'd seen somebody, a psychologist at TBCC, and she's been excellent helping her to navigate cancer treatments and ongoing recovery. And she's also giving a compliment to Wellspring.
Thanks, Deb. I'm glad you found it helpful. Dee says, what are some of the negative findings for some more in-depth practices? Well, it hasn't really been studied very systematically, but there are sort of case examples of people who maybe they had a history of trauma or something like that often, and then they go to these month-long retreats, and they might have thought disorders where they become somewhat dissociated. Some people have gotten into psychosis where they're hallucinating or having delusions, like quite serious psychopathology that hasn't resolved. So there are case stories like that. There's actually a place in I think it's in Boston called Cheetah House. There's a woman who runs it, and it's for people who have had these sort of traumatic mindfulness or meditation-based experiences where they go and kind of recover. So there's a whole, I don't know if she's written a book about that, but if you look up Cheetah House meditation, you would find some information about that.
It's a very deep, having done those kind of long retreats, it is a very deep dive into your nervous system and your mind, and has the potential for harm if there's the right circumstances.
And I have to say, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years in this context, and I have rarely come across any adverse events or negative sort of things that haven't resolved, with proper professional support, right? I don't I don't think it's necessarily always good to dive in so deeply without having a knowledgeable teacher or people around who can guide you through some of these, because unusual experiences aren't uncommon. Brief periods of feeling kind of out of your body, or, bringing up difficult emotions. I mean, that almost always happens when we sit and we allow that. All the difficult emotions we've been suppressing will probably arise, and that's actually not a bad thing. It can be overwhelming a little bit at first, but then they sort of process. So having someone who's knowledgeable to help sort of guide you through those things usually ends up with it, being integrated into a more positive experience.
And we had one person bring up the difficulties of spiritual communities where there can be boundary issues, as there are in all parts of life, sexual predators.
Yeah, no, there's some high profile stories around that for sure. Buddhist or meditation communities. Yeah.
Yeah. People being human beings, unfortunately, sometimes. So far, I don't think there's been any mass murders in the meditation hall.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it is sad when someone who's supposed to be enlightened, I don't know, enlightened, but who's a meditation teacher turns out to be taking advantage of people. That's really sad to see that.
Can I just say that it's really disturbing that you laughed about my comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Which comment?
About sexual predators. The host laughed about it.
Oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, it's probably nervous laughter. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic, and you're right. It's awful when things like that happen. Thank you, Mary.
Including to children.
Yes.
So thank you for understanding my response.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Actually, I've been aware of things like this personally and find it very disturbing. So my laughter is probably my own personal nervousness around the topic. So I apologize if that was harmful to you.
I understand, and thank you. And I'm sorry you had that experience.
Yeah. So yeah, we are very sensitive as human beings. So it's really good that people feel comfortable to bring it up right away. I'm so glad you did that, Mary.
You're very welcome. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, well, Linda, do you have any final comments that you want to make?
Oh, goodness. I think, as you said in your talk, aging, illness, death are universal experiences that we're all at some point going to go through. And so having a community to support you in that, having people who are like-minded, and having an instructor or a guide or a program to help you with that, and just the vast potential that these practices hold for navigating your way through these life stages. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. I did want to mention at the end here just about our next talk, reminding people on February 2nd, Mary Wallace, who is part of the cancer community as well. I believe she's a palliative care nurse was her profession, and she's going to talk about why do we meditate. And then just a little reminder about the donation option, which we really appreciate. And you're welcome to communicate with us about any topics that you're interested in hearing more about. So feel free to contact us and let us know if there's something, or if there's a speaker you'd like to inform us about as being an option for us. So again, thank you to everyone for being here this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again next time, at which time I will be on a month-long retreat, but there'll be somebody else here to host.
Yeah, good night, everybody.
Good night.